Hello, everybody. Welcome to Outpost Gray, where I provide you information in cybersecurity, technology, and innovation. If this is your first time here, welcome to my channel. You are in the right spot. It would mean the world to me if you hit that subscribe button and you became part of this community. Also, hit the like button on this video because I know you're going to love it, and share it out with others. For all my repeat offenders that have been part of the Outpost Gray community, thank you so much. You are the reason I do what I do. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Jack Scott. I'm your host. And what I do is I provide you content every week in this space, in the technology, cybersecurity, and innovation space, by having amazing guests on the show. And I'm really, really excited because today I'm going to be able to have the opportunity to actually nerd out with somebody who I not only admire, but she is literally at the top of her game in her industry. Now, little fun fact, I've actually had her on the show before. Unfortunately, there was an issue with the streaming, and so the video got corrupted, so she's back again. But I know that this round is going to be better than before. So, all right, let's kick it off. We've got Stephanie Siegmann, has 25 years of experience as a federal national security prosecutor and a trial lawyer, defending companies and individuals in complex government investigations. Some of her areas of expertise include cybersecurity, data privacy, international trade, national security issues, money laundering, healthcare fraud, and financial crime. And what I really love is her career started in the Navy. Yay, veteran, as a judge advocate, and then she eventually worked at the United States Attorney's Office, and today, where she is the partner in the chair for an international trade in cybersecurity, privacy, and data protection with Hinckley Allen. You guys are in for a serious treat. I am so thrilled about this episode, so let's get Stephanie on the show. Stephanie, welcome back. Round two.
Well, thank you so much, Jax, for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And you were so kind with your remarks about my career. But I want to also thank you so much for your service to our country in the special ops, and working now on a bill that I've been reading about, which I'm so I think is phenomenal. You've been such a great supporter of our troops, of our women, and now in the cybersecurity field. So I'm really honored to be here with you today. And so I've been here a year now in the private sector. Had been the national security chief at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Massachusetts, where I was in charge of all national security matters. And that included cyber intrusions. So I have a lot of backgrounds in this field, and I'm just so excited to be helping companies now dealing with this, what is a very serious issue. Companies are facing cyber attacks every day. No company, no organization is immune. I think there's some people that think that, if you have enough cybersecurity or assume that because you didn't have certain things that you're not going to get attacked. That is not the case, as we've seen with the supply chain attacks, even one that's going on right now. And our own government has had cyber attacks, and certainly they have immense resources. And if the hackers out there, especially certain governments, China and Russia, they're constantly hacking. They're trying to get into our networks, and they look for targets. And a lot of companies, unfortunately, are target rich but resource poor, and that is a big problem as well.
Yeah, you have such a wealth of knowledge, Stephanie. And we met during a CMMC conference in DC, and I heard you talk, and I knew you before that. So I was like fangirling. And so having you on the show is awesome because there's obviously a lot is going on in this space. And so we're going to be talking a few different topics today. Primary focus, just to set the stage for everybody listening, we're going to be talking about the National Cybersecurity Strategy. It just came out in March. We're still in March for another 24 hours. So if you haven't read that document, I would just kind of skim through it. It's a roughly 30+ page document, and some of the attributes of the document we're going to be talking about, which is active cyber defense. And so I want to kick it off first, Stephanie, and just get your perspective on the National Cybersecurity Strategy and the effectiveness of that document, because the community right now, and in my opinion, a lot of us are saying it doesn't really have teeth. There's not really any enforceable measures. So do you see this document as being something that could be enforced, or really just superficial gesture to the community?
So first of all, I want to back up for a second. It's a strategy document. From the perspective of the government, it sets forth what our strategy is going to be. And so from that perspective, I wasn't expecting it to have like, a detailed plans. It's 35 pages as it is. And it does, it has aspirational goals. That's what I think the majority of the document is, of building a more resilient digital ecosystem. And the word resilient appears numerous times in the document. But I think overall, and by the way, there's a lot of things in there that's going to require private sector buy-in. We don't know how a lot of these things are going to be implemented. So that remains to be seen. But overall, the goals of improving cyber defense, I think, are very worthy. Addressing cybercrime using both the Department of Defense and Department of Justice, and all tools approach is usually what you hear and what has been stated, set forth by the administration numerous times. Creating minimum mandatory cybersecurity requirements. That, I think, is starting. You're starting to see those come out. The EPA issued their minimum cybersecurity standards recently, right after this document was released. And we know that's really important because there was an attack of a Florida water treatment plant that could have been deadly if it wasn't caught in time. So that those types of things are important. And it also talks about increased liability for the private sector. Those are the general things. And it's like 5 pillars in there. I want to highlight a few things that I think are really important. And there hasn't been a great deal of movement on some of them that I think we really need to get accelerated. One of those is insurance. The fact of the matter is there has been a lot of statements recently. Lloyd's decision in August of 2022 that they're going to exclude state-backed cyber attacks. And then Zurich's CEO made a statement in December 2022 that basically cyber attacks are becoming uninsurable. Well, that's a huge issue for companies.
Yeah.
Huge, right?
Yeah, that's huge. We were
talking before earlier, Jax, about the NotPetya malware attack by Russia in 2017. And Merck is still fighting with its insurance company for the massive losses of over estimated to be, I think, $1.4 billion. That's huge for a company.
Yeah.
And so how do you have small or mid-sized companies? How can they afford this when you know that it's not a matter of if a company is going to be attacked, but when they're going to experience some form of a cyber attack? And the numbers are pretty extraordinary that, the vast majority of companies are facing cyber attacks every year. So in some form, right?
Yeah.
Saying that.
And I just looked
a ransomware attack every day. That's not the case, but you have the business email compromise attacks. You have phishing. You have all these things, and the phishing sometimes turns into a ransomware attack. And certainly those can be very costly. I think at some point, I hope we talk about I think ransomware, the use of ransomware is changing, and now it's more of extortion and data exfiltration that we're seeing. But so there's a discussion in the strategy document about creating a federal cyber insurance backstop. That has been discussed, and this is not the first time we've seen it. So the question is, okay, well, can we see some meat on that? Like, what does that mean? How is that going to be rolled out? Who's going to be, how is it going to work? Is it only going to work in supply chain attacks, or is it going to be, or is it going to occur? And so certainly, I think if you have like a Colonial Pipeline and a attack that may have, or SolarWinds, you have something that is going to affect a huge amount of companies, that should kick in, right? There should be a backstop. So that's one of the things I thought was interesting. It talks about giving federal grants to companies, but that there's no specifics provided. Offensively, though, I think what people were happy to see, or I think that, and it's long overdue, is basically increasing the speed, frequency, and scale of the disruption campaigns. We need our federal government. I mean, when I help companies through the cyber attacks, they all feel like, well, why is this happening? What is the government doing to help me as a small or mid-sized company? Sometimes they, even when you report sometimes to the FBI using the ic3.gov, you don't get a response. You get nothing. There's no no assistance or support provided. Now, they certainly, for the bigger companies, I think, and they do provide a lot of assistance, but some of the smaller companies are left to fend for themselves, and they feel like they're left alone, and that's a problem. The issue also that is raised related to that is, when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, we would often hear about, oh, this person had this attack, and I said, well, have we reached out, to other companies that are in the similar do similar work, they have a similar business model, they have a similar, products that they sell, to see if they may have the same malware on their system and they don't know. And they was like, well, that's classified. And they're like, well, we need to find a way to declassify that information and help these people. And I think that in this document, it talks about that. It talks about
data sharing.
That you need to do, more declassification, because information, and I think that is happening more often than I've saw it over the years I was at. I left the government in 2022 in February, but the issue is just trying to get information out there. And when you talk about information sharing, I think the other concern I have with regards to because there's been a lot of pounding on the table by the government saying people need to report, and people are not reporting this information, and the federal government feels kind of stymied then when things happen because they feel like they didn't have the information they needed. But you need the reporting structure that's being created, because there's a bunch of different channels that people are saying report it here. We have to make sure that when information is reported, it's acted upon. And often, I will say, having lived through the experience in my 18 plus years at the U.S. Attorney's Office, is there's government agencies that are doing redundant functions. Like there's many that are doing similar things, and they're not talking to each other.
No.
So we have to ensure that, and I think that CISA, the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Security Agency, is going to be in charge of that, which is good to have one agency in charge of all this information, but making sure that it does get to the right places. When you report to IC3, do you also have to report here? And how many reporting channels, do we need? And the timing for some of the, obviously the cyber incident reporting for the Critical Infrastructure Act of 2022, that's a long CIA is what I often just use the acronym because it's just a very lengthy name. There's rules that are being created that they're going to have to, any industry that falls within, or company that falls within the 16 sectors that's been defined as cyber or critical infrastructure, is going to have to report within 72 hours a cyber incident, a material cyber incident. We don't actually have a definition for what that is yet, but 72 hours is a really short time frame to report. That's, when I'm dealing with companies, sometimes, within the first 24, 48 hours, you still don't know what you're dealing with. Sometimes you do, but, often, it takes time for the company to figure out what they're dealing with. And often companies don't have like a incident response plan beforehand, and I get called, oh my God, I got hacked. What do I do? It's like, oh goodness gracious.
Oh, you don't have an incident response plan? Yeah. And that's so standard. That's like, you don't like having one is standard, and that's what's crazy is having an incident response plan is really standard, but then it's really standard for organizations not to have one. It's very typical, I guess I would say, not standard. So It's a critical document for organizations to establish. I'm working with a client right now in establishing an incident response plan for them. I want to pivot back on something on the National Cybersecurity Strategy for Pillar 2, because Pillar 2, I'm looking at it right now, it's the disrupt and dismantle threat actors.
Yes.
And as I was reading through this document, something that I noticed, the Pillar 2 really emphasizes the importance of involving the private sector in disruption activities through scalable mechanisms. The objective is to sustain and target disruptive campaigns to the point where criminal cybersecurity activity is no longer profitable and foreign government actors are discouraged from using malicious cyber tactics. However, and this is where I want to like really dig in with you, is I have concerns about the Cybersecurity Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986, as we call it, the CFAA, and how it could impact these efforts, given the individuals that, and my understanding of the CFAA, which will correct me on, but giving, say, the individuals may face possible prosecution for attempting to take action that could be considered hacking back. So I'm really curious, in your opinion, in your experience, how do you believe the CFAA could impact Pillar 2 of this in CSS?
So the so the question, I guess, is, can the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, can it be used to disrupt and dismantle cyber threat actors? All right, okay. So I guess the question I would say is the answer is yes and no. And why I say that, and don't say accurately, yes, it can always work, right? Is because criminal prosecution doesn't always work because especially in the area of malicious cyber actors, they're operating, many of them are operating overseas, and there's far more overseas than, I will say, we recently had an arrest with the breach forms in New York of a 20-year-old man, Connor Bryan Fitzpatrick. But most of the people behind cyber attacks or involved in cyber hacking and et cetera, and in this area, when I'm dealing with clients, are overseas, and they're in countries from which we cannot extradite them. They work in criminal safe havens, essentially, in Eastern Europe and Russia, and there's no way, we're not going to get any assistance often with those countries in getting them here to prosecute them. So the CFAA is great to bring charges, to indict somebody with. And often I will say it's used in conjunction with other federal statutes like wire fraud, identity theft, bank fraud. And I will also say that I expect we're going to be seeing more harassment and threatening activities, charges like cyber stalking, which is 18 USC 2261A. And why that is because, when you have a company or individual, the hacker or the cyber actor, who's like basically stalking the company to get payment, to extort money from them, to say, I'm going to take your stuff and I'm going to sell it online. I'm going to sell it on the dark web. And if you don't pay me, I'm going to do this. I'm going to destroy that. All those types of things could potentially be a cyber stalking charge. So I think that could be, you could see that in some indictments down the road. But the indictment is only going to work is if you can get the body. You can actually physically arrest the person and bring him, extradite him or bring him to court in the United States. And the problem that we have is that if they're beyond our power to arrest them, unless we get countries from that are assisting us, and sometimes we do, with the Hive takedown, there was a lot of assistance overseas from Germany and other countries. But in that instance, there was no criminal charges. There was the takedown of that ransomware gang and their websites and their servers, et cetera. But there was no charges brought. So I think when you're asking, will that statute work? Well, yes, if we can get them at the individuals. And certainly, even if you can't get them physically, you can take other actions, right? You can take actions to put them on debarment lists and entity lists and the OFAC list of specially designated individuals. They put cyber criminals and cyber terrorists on that group, those lists. And so then they can't do business, they can't access financial systems, those types of, involving the United States. And so that could be a means. And we also have that currency is not as, it used to be much more reputable, much more money in it.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've seen over the last year, with various FTX, et cetera, and all those other crypto exchanges deteriorating in value, and now their owners being charged, I don't know how much people are putting into crypto anymore.
Yeah.
But the payments are still mostly done in crypto.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a belief that it's anonymous, but there is ways to figure out who is behind it through the blockchain,
Yep.
et cetera. I know we're not going to talk more than that, but just throw that out there.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's a good goal to disrupt this ecosystem, this criminal ecosystem.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to take a lot of work. I think that, you mentioned hackback. I don't know if we want to talk about that issue.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would like to talk about hackback, but first I want to talk on the CFF. One more question. In your opinion, okay, the CFAA was established in 1986. You and I both know the threatscape has changed a lot. Technology has shifted a ton since then. And I'm curious, in your opinion, do you still think it's an effective law in today's cybersecurity landscape? Or do you think that it's time to maybe collectively consider amending the law to better support the defense of our digital security and our national security?
So that question comes up a lot with regards to a lot of national security issues, right? Because, there's a concern that the material support statute needed to be changed as well to address domestic terrorism and things of that sort, right? It would all depend on the law that they propose, the statute. There is concerns, I will say, with the act, the CFAA, because you had it used in some instances against people that were trying to, like, they're the white hat hackers,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to see if your network's secure, and they identify vulnerabilities on your public facing website, or things of that nature, and that was viewed as that could be potentially violate the statute. DOJ came out with a policy last year that we're not going to, those types of cases we're not going to be bringing any longer. But there was a concern that initially how it was interpreted and how it was drafted, unauthorized access to the network or access that exceeded your authority on the network could be charged. And so as technology changes, laws sometimes don't keep up.
Mm-hmm.
That is a given. Could there be a better law written? Sure. I mean, I think that you can say that as technology changes, laws should be updated. But what often happens is that because Congress has other priorities, or they can't agree on things, as we have seen.
Yeah.
And that brings me to the point that we talked about before. What I find unbelievable, I mean, I will say unbelievable, because I think it's just ridiculous at this time in 2023 that the United States still does not have a federal data privacy law. How is that possible? I mean, I can't fathom every other country. I mean, and so then, and why that I find that really difficult to grapple with, as is that companies now face the prospect with there's comprehensive data privacy laws being enacted by the states. 5 went into effect in 2023. Iowa's on the verge of one, and other states are doing the same. Is that you now have the possibility of companies that are not just brick and mortar companies that sell in one state, but they usually sell through e-commerce on their websites nationwide. That how are they going to comply with all these varying data privacy laws that may conflict, and they likely do. I mean, so and that's just going to be extraordinary costs, and I also find we're talking about the threat posed by TikTok and other foreign-owned apps, with our kids and with the amount of data they collect, yet we're not doing anything from a federal perspective to protect personal data.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Data, all of those things that are so fundamental and of concern to most people. I don't want my information, being sold or used for this purpose, and many people feel the same. So how do people, deal with that when we don't have a federal law? And so that's my hope, is that as a result of all these hearings on, at TikTok and other apps, that Congress will finally, in a bipartisan fashion, adopt a law that handles it nationwide.
Can you talk a little bit though, and like dive a little bit deeper, because I'm really curious. So anybody that's listening to this, the United States doesn't have a federal privacy law. It has a few states with some federal with some state laws. Virginia, I know, has one. The California, what is it? CCPA, California.
Yes.
I can't remember all the names, but there's literally, when I say a handful, like I think it's less than 10 states that actually have a privacy law. So can you talk about, why are we so slow to act in the federal government? Why is this not more of a priority, that we're like, it's 2023. Why are we not taking action and putting something together?
Well, I think that's a very good point. And so the issue that I see, so there's 5 states, Utah, Colorado, Connecticut, Virginia, and California.
Okay, 5. Okay, I thought it was 5. I didn't want to say 5 and be wrong, so I said less than 10. So, okay.
5 adopted comprehensive state privacy laws. I'm actually writing a brief article on this. And so that's why I had it right on the top of my head. It's coming out next week. And Iowa was passed both the House and the Senate, and it's waiting to be signed by the governor. So, but that will not go into effect until, I think, believe 2024. So you have these potentially 6, and Massachusetts, the state where I live, because I work in Boston, that's what people see behind me, is there's three different bills that are introduced in the Massachusetts House, and that people believe are likely ones going to pass. And I think the feeling is from states is, okay, fine. If the feds are not going to take care of this, we have to protect our people. We have to protect the personal data of our residents. And so that's what's happening. Many of these laws are based upon the GDPR, which is the EU's, the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, and which deals with data in a very different way than customarily the United States has dealt with it, in that, it recognizes that this is my personal data. It's not, and I should be able to control it and what you have in your system. And there should be a legitimate purpose for you collecting my data. And you cannot exceed that purpose. You need my consent to use my data. All of those types of things. And if I want it deleted, you have to comply with that request. You have to keep records of how you're handling those requests. So it's a very, and then what we're seeing, and I will say, even though it's not a comprehensive data privacy law, what Illinois has this biometric law, BIPA, the Biometric Information Privacy Act, which people are now bringing lots of lawsuits, class action lawsuits, because many of the privacy laws do not provide a private right of action, but BIPA does. And the verdict, there was a verdict in the fall of $228 million against a railway in a case in Illinois for violation of this BIPA. The issue in that law is that if you're collecting it and you don't have consent and you don't follow the law, the plaintiff and the people that are part of the class action don't actually have to show actual damages. So it's just a statutory damage of $5,000 and potentially up to $5,000 per violation, per person. And so, and it's every time your fingerprint is scanned is another violation. So you have you could see this in a driving company, and you have people that fingerprints that you scan before you get into your vehicle, all those types of things. And now universities, by the way, a a lot of university colleges for public safety. They use fingerprints. The kids lose their IDs, their access cards. And so it's an easy way. But what are they doing to ensure that biometric data is being collected and used in a proper fashion? It's being reasonably safeguarded. All of those things, I think, are part of this whole new ecosystem that we're dealing with, because the amount of data, I think there's this recognition that the amount of data that companies keep is astronomical. I will say that I recommend highly to my clients, because I often deal with them after or during a cyber attack. They call me up like, oh my God, I have hacked. And I talk to them, okay, where's your inventory? What's on your network? And many companies don't have that. They don't have the basics of any data mapping.
No.
They have no idea where everything's kept on their network and why. And when I say the why is, they have records going back as far as they had the company.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we need to minimize the amount of data that you're keeping. And by the way, that minimization issue is becoming really important to the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, because they are getting, they're very concerned and about this particular issue, because if you don't have the data on your network, guess what? It can't be stolen. It can't be
precisely
sold.
Right.
So those issues is like, why do you have data of every customer you ever sold to, or every
like 20 years
ever worked there? Yeah, exactly.
What is your recommendation on that for companies? Do you give them, I would say, if they're wanting to keep it, definitely do segmentation, least privilege, like get it off the network, get it where only like maybe a handful of people have access to it. But when you're talking with clients, maybe they don't have the resources to have that extra server, that cloud environment, or that Kubernetes, whatever they want to put it in. What would you tell them? Would you say 7 years and then try to delete everything from there? Do you have a hard, fast rule?
It's all dependent on the company. There is data retention laws, for certain things that has to be kept for, like in the export control area, right? Every company, if you sold and exported something overseas, you have to keep it for 5 years. You have to keep it for 5 years. Okay. But the 7 years, I don't know. A lot of, if an employee no longer works at your company, I would keep it for a short period of time after, and then there's no need for you to have their social security number or date of birth. You may want to keep records. I mean, the other issue is, you have to always worry, is a disgruntled employee going to come back and sue you? So there may be some pieces of information that you want to keep, but do you really need their social security and date of birth? I mean, so those are the types of things that I would go through. Because and a business that you sold, do you need all their tech plans of every part you ever manufactured for them? No. I mean, and what we saw last year, that manufacturing companies were the biggest target of ransomware. And that's because they have all this sensitive, confidential information. They might even have export control data. Whether it's controlled under the U.S. munitions list or the Commerce Control List. And that's very valuable, because they can say, oh, you work in the defense space, we know that you pay for this stuff to come back, because you don't want to be violating the laws. You don't want anyone in the defense sector to know you didn't have reasonable safeguards and controls. You didn't comply with NIST 800-1, all those types of things. But certainly, my hope is that all the hearings that we've been having in this were related to data, that spurs the Congress to finally pass the American Data. I'm sorry, now can't remember the entire name. American Data Privacy and Protection Act. I had written
American Data Privacy and Protection Act. Okay.
And that it didn't pass last year, and the reason it didn't pass is the California delegation, where they do have very strict, more strict data privacy laws than everyone else, the CCPA, that the law for a national law to work, there will have to be some preemption. Like, you can't, the reason you need to have, we're going to have a federal uniform standard across the country. What that means, you can't have states that do something that conflicts with the federal law.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but hopefully we'll see some more action on the, we'll call it this 80PP for now. Everything always gets an acronym in the military, or in the federal government and in the military. So I want to circle back really quick on a topic that we didn't touch on, but we mentioned, which was the hacking back piece. And the reason I want to bring that up is prior to the release of the National Cybersecurity Strategy, there was a news report that came out. And what is really concerning now that I've seen the NCSS is this news report. It came out in like January, and they had actually stated that the Biden administration was going to allow hacking back as part of this NCSS. However, upon examination of the document, there's no mention of such action. So I'd like an opportunity just to be able to clear up any confusion and allow you to kind of explain what is the difference between hacking back and that active cyber defense, or what we're seeing in that NCSS.
So regarding hacking, I read the same thing. And actually, I was, people asked me, like, what's your opinion about this hacking back? And what is, and over the years, I will say, every company feels so invaded and violated, by a cyber attack. They went into my network. This is my property. It's like an analogy usually I hear is, it's like if someone walks through my front door, breaks into my house, I have the right to defend myself, right? So that's the what I think the company perspective is. The problem is in the scenario of someone breaking into your house, you can see who that person is. Mm-hmm. You can see who broke in, the criminal. Yep. In the scenario of a cyber attack, attribution is extremely difficult. You don't know who's on your network. You don't know how many cyber actors may be on your network. Is it one person? Is it two people? Are they working together? What group are they affiliated with? All of those questions take time. And even the government, when there's been attacks on the government, it's taken time, and they have extraordinary resources, more than a private company would have. And they have the access to classified information, and they know how certain networks operate, and they collect that information. But the hackers, they spoof they're spoofing IP addresses. You don't know where, it's hard to identify them. Sometimes the way that in the private sector that they're identified is they tell you what group they're affiliated with. Yeah, I'm going to post your stuff on this leak site, Lockbit's leak site. And sometimes these companies are not big enough to have their own, so they may use even Lockbit in their, even if they're not affiliated.
Yeah.
And so that becomes, so what are we going to do? Are we going to allow private people to then hack back, and you don't know who you're hacking? Like, you don't know. And what if the cyber actors had co-opted, someone else's computer, or and it made it appear as if this legitimate company, in the United States maybe, or overseas in Europe, did the attack, but they didn't. They were just a victim too. And so then you're going to attack them, potentially causing them a lot of damage. You then become liable. If you're then hacking into a foreign country, you're violating another country's laws, anti-hacking laws. You could create an international incident too, right? So, and going back to I think we mentioned the NotPetya example, the consequences of a cyber attack, you can't control. I mean, it's not just like, someone comes into your house, you have for self-defense purposes, you have a gun in your house, and you shoot and you injure the individual that came in, let's say. Well, if you're actually doing a cyber attack, that's not what happens. You might hit the person, maybe you hit the person that actually did it, but you might hit other people too.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of significant collateral consequences that can occur. And so that's why I think the scenario of hacking back was not authorized for the private individuals. And how, the other piece of it that I thought was interesting, like, they're really going to authorize hacking back, like, to every company?
I know, it's scary.
I mean, like, who that are not qualified to even do an investigation? That's could be frightening. What damage could they potentially cause, and who's going to pay for that damage? I mean, are you going to give them, some type of immunity? Okay, I get to hack back without any, ramifications. That can't be the case. That's basically authorizing companies to engage in illegal activity.
Yeah.
Now, I think that the language we heard from the Deputy Attorney General, Lisa Monaco, when the Hive, and that, which was interesting because that came out, that article about hacking back came out around the same time as the Hive ransomware takedown. And Dag Monaco said, we hacked the hackers, we hacked them back. And so I'm like, oh, interesting. They're using that terminology in relation to the government, so the government. And I think what we're going to see is after that is that there is this anticipation that there's going to be a lot more disruption campaigns conducted, potentially, coordinated disruptions between DOD and DOJ in this space. And that's the hope. And that if the government takes up much more of an active role to disrupt the cyber criminals, then the private sector won't need to, and they're not qualified to. And so let's just be honest.
Yeah.
And the difference between hacking back and the active cyber defense that you mentioned is so hacking back is doing something outside your network offensively, a counterattack essentially, and you are then you don't have authority to actually attack another network. That exceeds your authority essentially. Well, you don't have authority because that's not your network. With a cyber active defense model, you're taking steps to protect your own network. And so that model is I think very different. There's sometimes, you can use all kinds of tools of deception on your network to deceive if you think that someone's in your network, doing things, but that is completely different. And of course, you're authorized on your own network to take steps that you wouldn't be authorized to do outside your network.
Yeah, I love that differentiator. And so anybody that's confused, just keep that in mind. Hacking back outside the network, active cyber defense, you're going to stay in the network. And if you get outside your network, then you could have legal consequences. I think that's the biggest thing here. And attribution is hard. So Stephanie, unfortunately, when you're coming to time, we could keep talking. I actually have like 4 more questions. So we're going to literally have you on the show, and it'll be the legit 2.0, because this was going to be our 2.0 version. So you're going to have to come back, because I want to read the report when that comes out that you've written about is it a federal privacy laws, or are you just doing a report?
No, I'm doing it on state privacy laws.
Okay, cool.
An overview of where we're at today. I do write a lot on LinkedIn. I've always posted on LinkedIn. So if people are looking for any articles, my last one was on the importance of cyber incident response plans. And they are really incredibly important. For certain sectors, you are required to have them. Like if you have HIPAA information, if you're in the healthcare space, you are required to have one. But other companies, it's just not a requirement for most people most companies at this time. I mean, certain state laws do require it as well. Like in Massachusetts, there's a requirement for a written information security plan.
And for everybody, it's looking to connect with Stephanie, b.stephanie. You can find her on LinkedIn. This is her page right here. It is up. And then, Stephanie, when you get the report, when you get your article written, share it with me, and I'll put it in the show notes for down below, so everybody can actually get connected to it. Yeah. And what is the best way outside of LinkedIn for people to be able to contact you? Is LinkedIn the best approach?
So I have I'm at Hinckley Allen. So if you just Google Stephanie Siegmann with my spelling right here, it'll take you to my Hinckley Allen website, where it has my bio, it has my phone number and my email address at the firm. And, individuals reach out to me all the time for advice. And obviously what I said on this show doesn't constitute legal advice. You need to call me and seek legal advice for me to provide you any legal advice. This was generally just for educational purposes. I did do that disclaimer so I don't get in trouble. There was a lie or something. Yeah, so I do speak, and we have a big cybersecurity conference. If anyone in the national defense space at Gillette Stadium at Gillette on May 10th, the National Defense Industrial Association is holding their annual cyber event. So I throw that out there. If anyone's in the Massachusetts area and they're interested, we're going to have all kinds of speakers. It's going to talk about cybersecurity and CMMC 2.0. I think you said this 2.0, and that's 2.0 too. And I would love to see folks if they are interested.
That would be great. I would love to get up there. I might be able to get my leadership to approve that. Let me get up there.
That would be wonderful, Jax.
Are you speaking at the event?
I am speaking at an event. I'm speaking on the harsh consequences of non-compliance, cybersecurity non-compliance. Because obviously we didn't talk about this, but there was a recent criminal prosecution. So it's not just civil liability of the Uber former chief security officer, Joseph Sullivan. And we're talking about all kinds of things related to the DOJ's Civil Cyber Fraud Initiative, which we also didn't get to talk to today. So I'll definitely come back and we'll talk about that. And the third settlement under that initiative was recently announced, the Jelly Bean Communications.
I would love to dig into all of that with you. That would be awesome.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun talking to you. And good luck with your bill.
Thank you, Stephanie. You're the best. Have a great day.
All right. Take care. Bye.